Om Shri Sai Ram, offering my most humble and prayerful salutations at the lotus feet of our beloved Bhagwan, Sri Satya Sai Baba. Dear brothers and sisters, yet again we are here continuing this beautiful offering of sharing his story, his message through his voice. Let us jump into this program right away with our prayer, and I request all of you to please join me in. O Lord, take my love and let it flow in fullness of devotion to Thee. O Lord, take my hands and let them work incessantly for Thee. O Lord, take my soul and let it be merged in one with Thee. O Lord, take my mind and thoughts and let them be in tune with Thee. O Lord, take my everything and let me be an instrument to work for Thee. Sai Ram. Sai Ram, brothers and sisters. This series has been really heartening, fulfilling, and a most blessed experience we are having. Every day when we contemplate on this topic, Bhagwan allows us to learn something new, allows us to look at the words which we had presumed to understand, which we thought we knew, taking a new shape and a new dimension in our life. Discussing Avatar is like relearning our own life. Learning a little bit extra, taking one more step towards our Bhagwan, has opened a new understanding and appreciation of this birth itself. How we look at Bhagwan, how we look at ourselves, and how do we look at this blessed life as a gift from our Master. So let us continue this beautiful journey where we are discussing the attributes. It sounds very light to say the attributes of an avatar, but let me say the attribute which help us not only to get a glimpse into what an avataric life means, but also to understand and encourage us to realize our true purpose of life, which is to know our own innate divinity. So without any further ado, let me invite my brothers on this discussion, and let me start off by welcoming Brother Hemant. Sai Ram, Brother Hemant.
Sai Ram, brother.
Welcome to his story through the eyes of his boys. Brother Hemant has been, as I told you earlier last week also, Brother Hemant has studied from grade 1 and went on to do his MTech in Prashantanilayam campus. He has enjoyed watching Bhagwan as a kid in primary school, learned so many beautiful lessons. He's an excellent orator and also a dramatics. I think all of them have been blessed by Bhagwan to learn so much and get exposure from Swami through the act of drama. So welcome, Hemant.
Sai Ram, brother.
Let me welcome Brother Ranganath Raju.
Sai Ram, brother.
Brother Raju has been for 9 years with Bhagwan as a student, I would say. But after that, he joined in 11th grade and went on to do his MA in economics. Then MBA he did. And Brother Raju is also a very, very, I would say, great dramatics. He has written so many dramas, directed so many plays in front of Bhagwan. In fact, we have heard quite a few stories about your, what do you call this, corridor dramas, right? So,
Yes.
Raju. So there was the new concept which Bhagwan helped you all to create and learned so much from them. So Brother Raju, Sai Ram, and welcome to this
Sai Ram,
evening.
brother.
Sai Ram. And last but certainly not the least, we have Brother Jagadish Chandra. Brother
Correct.
Jagdish joins us from Germany, and he also has spent over 10 years with Bhagwan. And I would say he's also part of the drama group. And I think you, in your era, Bhagwan really used drama as a tool to teach you and share with you the glimpses of his divinity. Am I right, Jagdish?
Absolutely, brother. We are blessed to be given that opportunity to perform our penance through that. Of course, the reward was equally fantastic in a way that we got him. But yes, we are grateful to Swami for that opportunity.
Yes. So, and I think today when we are talking about the attributes of Bhagwan or avatar and how do we understand and look at it, I'm sure those experiences, those interactions with Bhagwan during your drama times or your public speaking occasions, I think those will surely trigger some thoughts and learnings which you can today sit back and realize that Bhagwan had sown those seeds at that moment, and we are finding, fruition today.
Absolutely.
So wonderful. So let us continue this beautiful discussion which we were having. So last time we had looked at a couple of attributes, if I may say so, of an avatar, and let me quickly run it through. We were looking at what is how to look at avatar and understand. So we looked at the categories of avatar, and just to understand that the manifestation of the supreme consciousness can happen in various ways. So for our understanding purposes, we have created this Dashavatara concept time, but it can manifest in many, many ways. So you had the category of Purusha, Guna, Lila, Yuga, Manavantara, and Shakti Avesha, and we discussed about them. And we also looked at the type of avatars. So, depending on, as I would always use it as avatar chooses to express his glory and the degree of expression. So, like as a Shirdi Sai, he had a one scope of expression. As a Krishna, he had a different scope of expression. As Rama, he did differently. As Parshurama, he did differently. But to say that one was bigger or smaller will be an act of ignorance. But it is like the time and space which avatar chooses to express, and that is where this amsha, avesha, kala, purna, and all comes. And that is where we were getting a glimpse of our Bhagwan, that in this form he was Paripurna avatar, and we discussed those aspects also. And then we looked at these attributes, and here we even considered, we had little bit of insight into what Daya could mean, what Shama could mean, and I think we were discussing Shama. So I would like to restart the discussion at Shama portion, in which we were talking about forgiveness and forgiveness towards others, and then we discussed about forgiveness towards ourselves, like forgiving ourselves before we can do it. So there were some kind of a question which came from the viewers about that. There was a sense of consequence attached to Shama, and there was also an expected understanding of what do we really mean when we say I have forgiven myself, and does it mean that I am like taken care of the consequences to others of how we have handled it. So let me start this discussion, invite Jagdish to share your thoughts on that, and we can open the floor.
Sure, brother. So this is a very beautiful question, and it's apt that we discuss it, because if we mistake the understanding of this particular concept, it very easily pushes us to the other side of the boundary into the realms of narcissism. See, there are people that are hardened criminals. They do acts day in and day out which totally are beyond our imagination, and yet they are in a position to live happily. At least it appears outwardly that these things do not touch them at all. Crimes and all of these things do not touch them. Their behavior, their so-called behavior in the world, portrays that they are in a position to forgive themselves very easily. For a spiritual sadhaka, what does that mean? is it equal to the same that we are discussing? What we are discussing is a more conscientious approach to this whole philosophy, wherein we are trying to take the other end, wherein even entertaining a wrong thought is something that is taken very seriously, and we try to seek forgiveness from the Lord for having thought it, or for entertaining that thought. And from that perspective, Shama becomes a method of correcting the mistakes that we have made. And that is why it forms a part of that Ashtanga Yoga of Patanjali in one of the yamas. It's basically a deleting mechanism so that a sadhaka is happy or able to live with what he has done in some sense. I would like to share something, a beautiful episode, and it's a very deep one to understand. Why forgiving oneself, and what does it really mean to forgive oneself? It was a point in time when a new car um, was offered to Bhagwan. And Swami, very enthusiastically, and he says, I'm a child among children, man among men, and woman among women. So he was extremely enthusiastic. And as he was trying to sit into the new car, he had half of his body had gone in, the leg was still outside. And one of the students, in his enthusiasm, he shut the door, excitement rather. He shut the door, not realizing that Swami's foot was still outside. Even then, when the door hit Swami's foot very badly, that was a sudden up. And then Swami had a smile, looked at him and said, Hey, Dunna Pota. And then he gently closed the door again and went in. It appeared as if nothing had happened. In fact, some might have thought, why did Swami do that? That's a very gross level of Shama. I mean, see, it slammed on his door. Probably something serious would have happened. And he just looks and he smiles and says, Dunna Pota. So actually at his level, it has a totally different meaning. But nevertheless, going ahead with that episode, that evening, Swami said, no need for bhajans today, just give arati and I will leave or I'll retire. And Swami went. And then that evening, it was found out that Swami suffered a hairline fracture. That slamming of the door, basically, that ankle portion, that round portion near your ankle, that bone took a hit and it had a hairline fracture. And as per medical advice, you're asked to take a rest for some days. But for the Lord, what is rest? The subsequent morning, when the pain grew, there's at least something like 20 meters, not 20 meters, maybe 10 meters or so, the distance between the room, Swami's bedroom, and the dining hall. And as Swami was coming from the dining hall, he was limping. There were some boys who were standing on the veranda and they were watching. Everyone felt the pain, but amongst them, one late Sri Radhakrishna Garu, a very known name in the Sai fraternity. He ran, he lifted Swami in his arms, and Swami kept, hey, Radha, leave me, don't. But he just didn't bother. He just lifted Swami in his arms, took him all the way to the bedroom, put him on his bed, and then walked out. The interesting part was the others who were standing there, one of those brothers who shared this experience, they said, I was also standing there. But for us, what dominated most was what would happen if Swami does not like what I do. My sense of ego was higher than my love for God. Everyone felt the pain, but who acted? The only one who could say, I don't care what happens to me. Even if Swami is going to throw me out from here, it's okay, but I will do what gives him relief. It's exactly like the Gopika statement, right? The dust of their feet, willing to give if it gives them eternity in hell, because it will give them the momentary happiness, or it will give momentary happiness to Krishna. The ability to forgive myself is at a very subtle level. We are not even aware that our own importance or what the consequences that our ego has takes a precedence over our love for Swami. At that point, if I replay this whole scene, making myself as one of those bylookers or onlookers of that scene, can I close my eyes and say, Swami, forgive me, I could not love you. The moment I utter that in sincere and silent prayer, that is the highest Shama, I think. This is what I wanted to share.
You have brought in a very different dimension of Shama, if you look at it. I have also had, like, I can relate to that. How resistance comes in ourselves, but I never realized that to be a part of my ego. So thanks to bring it out. It is such an eye opener, I would say. Anyway, Raju, you were saying something, please.
This reminds me, as Jagdish was sharing, this kind of reminded me of an incident that was shared by a very senior devotee. He used to walk behind Swami, and he was also the spiritual head for Satyai Seva organization, Ramanrao Garu. So one day he was uh, telling a few of us an incident in which Swami was returning from Bangalore, and Swami had got into the car, and there was one more brother along with Swami, and those were the days when he was assisting Swami physically. I mean, he would walk behind Swami and assist collection letters and all that. So there was one young Sevadal boy who was very enthusiastic. His devotion was so enthusiastic that it was evident from his eyes, from the way he smiles at Swami, his body language and all that. So when Swami was elders there wanted to kind of give him an opportunity to be close to Swami, looking at that sheer enthusiasm. So they brought him forward, and Swami was getting into the car. Swami just sits, and Swami is still, he's still taking the foot in, and this boy, out of uh, lot of enthusiasm, he comes forward and he wants to hold the door of the Lord's car. So he holds it and he slams the door. Swami, and as the door slams, Swami beams a smile, looks at him, beams a smile, and says and blesses him like this. It was such so everybody thought that Swami kind of liked the way in which the door was slammed, because Swami's face little lit up. The minute the door slammed, Swami's face lit up, and Swami looks at this boy and he blesses Abhayasta. This boy was peering into Swami's window, he was almost tears, and like saying that, Swami, please kind of have a safe journey, take care of yourself. That kind of body language he was executing. And the convoy starts. It leaves Bangalore. I mean, reaches a spot where there are not many people. Swami asks the car to be stopped. That is when he opens the door and he takes his foot inside completely. Then they realize that the Swami's little finger, the little toe, was actually slammed because of the door. And this entire incident was witnessed by our person. So he was quite angry, quite livid with that boy, that he wanted to go back and make sure that the boy is never ever seen anywhere as a Sevadal again. So, and what's the first thing that as Swami takes the foot in, he calls our gentleman and he says, I wanted you to know this, that had that minute, had I expressed even a tinge of pain, I know what you would have done to that boy, you all. But I wanted to make sure that the boy is protected. And he says, it is me, it is this body which suffered. It is this body which underwent pain. Why are you so agitated? You should not have that uh, uh, feeling of what do I say, dislike towards the boy. And our Ramanagar was moved. He holds Swami's hand and says, Swami, how is it that you're able to do this? And Swami says, see, if you are, then Swami goes to the next step of emotional blackmail. He says, if you are my true devotee, నువ్వు నాకు నిజంగా భక్తునివి అయితే నీ మనసులో ఎలాంటి హాని కలిగించాలనేటువంటి ప్రేరేపణ కూడా రావద్దు. యూ షుడ్ నాట్ ఈవెన్ హ్యావ్ ద ఇన్స్టింక్ట్ ఆర్ ఈవెన్ ఏ థాట్ ఆఫ్ హార్మింగ్ సమ్మన్. And then Swami says, that is the real walking behind me. That is when you appudu na venka nu nadichinnattu. That is the real act of following me. And Swami closes the door completely and the journey starts. And he says, from that day I have been trying to walk behind Swami. He completed that entire narration telling me that I thought I was actually walking behind Swami. Then I realized I was never following Swami. I think when the Lord sets an example, it is for each one of us to follow. It is as last time it was recalled by Hemant, that he has nothing to to gain from the work of the world, but yet he sets an example so perfectly that each one of us can be him in at some point of time.
Wow. Wow. When I hear this, I realize our Bhagwan is, of course, the greatest, but his devotees are also great, who can pick up these lessons and reflect it back. It is so much, because so many of us look at it, but only a devotee can have that sukshma buddhi, as Bhagwan says, the subtlety of the observation to learn lessons from this is beautiful. Let me, from the same thought I get, Bhagwan does all of that to show, if I may use the term, Shama or Daya. But what is from his perspective? Hemant, jump in.
I think beautiful. We started off with very nice experiences, set the mood for this wonderful experiences by Jagadish and Brother Raju. Um, but I think last time we were discussing both Daya and Shama, and these are very human qualities, right? Because we have bodies, because we interact with others, there's a scope for this Daya and Shama. So how do we attribute these human qualities to God? I think I'd like to look upon this, and Swami has emphasized this. These are two facets of love, Daya and Kshama, which make human love into divine love. They help us transform. Very, very easy techniques, Daya and Kshama. So, Daya is when you spread your ego to something beyond yourself. You spread it so wide and far that you have the ability to feel the pain of every being. That is when human Daya or human compassion becomes divine. And the ability to forget the pain caused by others is Kshama. Both of them deal with pain in very different ways. When you have the ability to feel someone else's pain, it becomes Daya. When you have the ability to forget your own pain, so extending that oneness is Daya, whereas cutting down on Ahankara or Dehabhimana becomes Kshama. And Raju narrated that beautiful experience. And your question is also very apt here. Like, can we attribute these qualities to God? I think Swami is setting an example of how we should behave in such situations. The last time we were discussing how Kshama has to come from a position of ability, right? Like Kalidasa says, Jnane Maunam Kshama Shaktau. Kshama has to be, or the value of Kshama is seen in when someone is capable and still able to forgive. When someone is powerful and still forgives, then the value of Kshama is there. But I think it is much beyond just having the ability to forgive because you can forgive. Whether you can or whether you not, you forget the pain that is caused by you. That is true Kshama. It has nothing to do with your ability to retaliate. It has nothing to do with your ability to punish the other person. It is something to do with my own being. And when I let go of that anger, when I let go of that pain and say to myself, it is fine, it is God's play, it's God's wish, and that becomes truly Kshama. So I remember this beautiful experience of how Swami teaches Kshama. This is a very popular experience by that happened to Ravi Kumar sir, who is the warden of Brindavan. So he was when he was a young boy, he was studying in a school in Bangalore, and every Sunday they would go to Brindavan to have Swami's darshan, and he would also attend Bal Vikas classes. It was a period in his life where his father was very busy with work, and there was no one monitoring what is happening to him. So he fell into bad company. So he would skip classes, watch movies. Very adjacent to his school, there was a few theaters, and he would go and bunk classes and spend time there. And then he would also attend Bal Vikas, and everyone felt everything it was going smooth. So one Sunday morning, when they went to Brindavan for darshan, Swami called them for interview. So Swami called, and so Sir Ravi Kumar sir, he was coming towards Swami, and his father was also following. And then Swami struck a conversation. Swami said, "Good boy," Swami said. And so as he was approaching Swami, this was a thought that was running in his mind. Swami is going to reveal what happened. And so he's there's a trepidation. But as soon as he hears that good boy, he think, okay, Swami doesn't know what is happening, so he's very happy. And then Swami calls his father and says, "Go and call the other devotees from his center." So the father leaves Swami's immediate presence and he goes away. And then Swami takes him to task. He said, "Good boy, where were you yesterday? That was a Saturday. So sir is not willing to let go of any information. Okay, well, if you know, why don't you tell? That's what's running in his mind. Huh? And so then Swami reminds him, you were in Ajanta theater, you're watching Katti Patang, Asha Patik. Swami gives the hero, heroine's name in that movie, and he tells him who was sitting next to him, which seat he was sitting. And as Swami is revealing this, you can imagine the fright, fear, and because the corner of his eye, he's seeing his father approach. And as the father approaches, Swami changes his demeanor. And then when father comes very close, Swami says, "Good boy," and tell him to keep good company. And he leaves it at that. That was that transforming moment, At that moment, sir recalls that and he says, Swami had to just show his omniscience to his father and reveal the same thing he had told him. And the father would have done like Sastang Pranam. He would have prostrated in front of Swami and said, Swami, you are God, you know everything. Please take care of my child. And he would have been a devotee for life. Swami didn't want that devotion. Swami wanted transformation. He didn't care for his omniscience. He just wanted that transformation in the child. And that is what Swami uses Shama for. He uses it as a tool. All of these are tools in God's arsenal, not to showcase his ability to do something. It is just to bring about that transformation in us. Seeing that Kshama, our heart will melt. Swami is able to forgive someone like me. Why can't I forgive my people who I think have done harm to me, who have not been good to me? Why am I carrying these grudges? And that's what causes us to transform ourselves. So I look upon these as tools rather that Swami exhibits. You cannot define an avatar as having Daya, like brother you were saying, as having Kshama. These are just tools that he shows. He sets an example for us, I think. And these are very beautiful examples. And we see examples in the other avatars and in Swami's life too. We have multiple examples as we will discuss further on Shama and how it is a transformative tool
The-
for our
You,
elevation.
Hemant,
this
you brought in another flavor to this thing. You used the word Deha Vimana. I would like you all to explain and highlight what is the relationship between Kshama and Deha Vimana. Deha Vimana, let me translate it quickly and you all can elaborate it further. It is basically the body consciousness or the self, the physical ego or a body consciousness is Deha Vimana. So what is the relationship? Raju, you want to jump in and
Yes, brother. So I just have one small request.
sure,
When Hemant was narrating, another incident struck me. It
please
happened to one
share.
of our, yes. So after that, probably we will go into this
Yeah,
Dehabhimana. It's
sure,
something
sure.
we had put up in our shared this in alumni drama also, but I thought it's worthwhile sharing again. There was this brother of ours, quite senior to us. He had joined hostel. He never liked. He comes from an affluent family. He never held a broom in his life. So he did not like the way in which hostel had its entire setup. And in fact, at one point of time, he wanted to he comes from a affluent background, so the food habits were very different. The way in which things were done at his place was very different. So he was quite upset with the food that was given in hostel, even though all others were finding it very tasty. Out of sheer angst for all the betrayal that he felt that his father had done to him and put him in this remote place in this hostel, so he wrote a long list of complaints to Swami in a letter saying as to how bad the food is. He writes an entire list as to how this particular chutney had so much salt, this particular curry had so much this thing, and this particular teacher is how he is behaving. This long list of complaints. The father is a great devotee. He wanted sincere obedience of this child, and he also at the end he also writes a note to Swami saying that, a request to Swami saying that, I kind of forgive you that in spite of having all these hostel problems in your hostel, I kind of don't tell this to my father. I would not like to tell this to my father. So you also reciprocate this act, that you also don't share this with my father. So it's like a tacit
I
agreement
can't,
between.
I can't believe we had such issues also. Okay.
So this brother gives letter and he's holding letter in darshan. Swami comes, Swami, and that day, good or bad or his whatever fate would have it, he had seen father sitting in that VIP block. Swami had already, father had already come for darshan and he's sitting there. And by the time he realizes that his father is already there, Swami comes and picks up the letter from his hand. And now this boy, and Swami picks it up. Swami opens it, he reads it, and Swami's face becomes quite serious. His demeanor changes, and he's thinking, this boy is no, the trepidation in his heart increases, that what would Swami do? I mean, his reaction changed to something unexpected. Now he's walking towards the father. He thinks, now please do not betray me. See, I would not tell the shortcomings of your hostel to anyone, nor should you tell my shortcomings, that I have a complaint. This to, it's like our mutual respect. And Swami went to the father, and this boy gets up, runs away to hostel. He's just not able to take it anymore. He runs away to hostel, and probably 30 or 30 minutes later, the teachers come searching for him in the hostel and say, your father is livid, he's quite angry with you, he is standing outside the hostel, come. And and this is when the boy starts feeling that, my God, people say that you are God, but you have betrayed me. You have let go of my honor, and all those thoughts were running in his head about Swami. And as he comes out, and father is holding that letter which he had given to Swami.
Oh my
And
God.
father is very angry. He says, what is it that you have done? And now boys, no, he wanted to confess. He wanted to say, please, I will not repeat it again. Let it go. This is a silly mistake out of immaturity. I will continue to stay here. And all those things were running. He was about to pronounce all those. And that is when he says, you cannot take Swami for granted. If you want to give letters to Swami, write something and give. Why do you give an empty sheet? And he opens the sheet like that. It is all empty. and and boy was speechless. Like, he's not able to understand what happened. I mean, where did all those complaints disappear? And next day, Swami tells him that uh, when you sincerely repent and offer everything to the Lord, he says, with me it's a clean slate. I wipe out. It is that love, my love for you, is so strong that it wipes it away. And that moment, as Hemant was saying, that moment was the changing moment, the transformation moment in this boy's life. And from then on, he continued to be a strong, what do I say, proponent of the hostel system. And even to this day, the brother makes sure that he goes and talks to the students to take up activities of the hostel. It's a very different boy altogether. After that particular Kshama, it's like Swami literally wiped out his inner shortcomings through that act of forgiveness.
Beautiful.
And as you're saying, yeah, we will go back to the topic that you were talking about the Dehabhimana in Shama. I'll just start it and probably leave it to other brothers to join in. uh, Swami beautifully mentions in one of the discourse, he says, if you look at the word Kshama, or rather uh, English sense, it has two elements. One is the act of forbearance. It is forbearance, and second is forgiving. You are able to bear something, and you're also able to forgive something, and these two kind of constitute Shama.
Yeah, there
And
are two sides of same
yes,
coin.
yes.
Okay, yeah.
So
Forbearance
some
and forgiveness. Yeah.
forgiveness. And so Swami beautifully elaborates that for you to forgive something, or for you to bear something, what comes as a deterrent is the identity of yourself, or rather the ego. And he goes on to give the example, and he also gives, probably we will talk a little later about the ways of overcoming this, and he goes on to give examples of how this barrier can be overcome through various techniques. Now I leave the floor open to others to join.
Beautiful. Yes,
I- I'll,
Jagdish.
I'll, I'll join here, brother, to just take the cue from what Raju has set rolling, and Hemant very beautifully explained. Swami once very beautifully mentioned, do not keep in mind or do not remember the harm that others have done to you and the good that you have done to others. Not remembering what the wrongs or the bad or the harms that others have done unto me is an aspect of Shama. You want to, that's part of memory to be deleted. Not remembering the good that you have done is where the discussion is going, is Deha Vimana. It's basically, if I remember all the good that I have done to others, that is what boosts my ego and makes me believe that I have done something. And this is where what gives rise to that particular aspect of Deha Vimana. And Shama sort of is a beautiful mechanism given, or the second order effect or a mechanism that is given so that we are able to get rid of that. Another question is, how do we address this aspect of the Abhimana? We have talked Shama of two types, or rather, when we define Shama, just now Hemant quoted a verse from Kalidas. It says, for the mighty, Shama is a virtue. It's when you're in a position of strength. But let us think for a moment, what about the weak? 90% of the time, we are at a position where somebody very powerful, he comes and slaps me. I'm in no position to reciprocate it. And I live with that anguish throughout my life. How do I forgive him? What is the definition of Shama? Because 90%, 99% of people are like that. We are like that. There are some very powerful foes, and we are at the receiving end most of the times. And how do we forgive? What is the definition of Shama in that context? This is where I would quote another experience of late Sri Rama Brahma.
Powerful fools. Okay. The powerful expression. Okay.
So we quote the experience of Rama Brahmangaru. He was the caretaker of Vrindavan, a very well-built, sturdy personality, 25 years older to Swami at the physical realm. And something about his person, just to enable the viewers to imagine what the personality is, that if you ask him to whisper something, people in the 50-meter radius would be able to hear. So that was the personality, tall, and an imposing personality.
By the way, we have shown Ram Brahmam Garu's picture and all that on the program because we have discussed about him.
Fantastic. Yeah. So Rama Brahma Garu was the caretaker of not just Swami's residence in Vrindavan, but all the fields and the college premises and everything that was adjacent to that. One fine day, because of something happened, I don't want to go into the details of that, that is irrelevant, Swami told Rama Brahma Garu not to come upstairs anymore. So prior to that, Rama Brahma Garu was sort of the first devotee in Swami's realm. Means early in the morning when Swami would step out, he would be the one who would open the doors of Trai or the bungalow, Vrindavan bungalow, and take Swami's Pada Namaskar. And towards the evening, he would be the one who would escort Swami to his room, do Pada Seva, do Pada Namaskar, and then come out. So the first and in between, all the dining sessions, all the sessions of meals, he would be there with Swami. That person who was literally spiritually pampered by Swami, one moment Swami tells him, from tomorrow onwards, ask him not to come. And he was the person who was suffering from high BP, diabetes, and all sorts of ailments. And just to add to the agony, this thing, that he will now not get a chance to meet the only person on whom his life right now depends. He couldn't bear it anymore. And one fine after 3-4 days of intense agony, his face literally puffed up, as if the tears were held back by the face, as accumulated. And he comes down and sends a message upstairs to Swami. Swami was seated there and tells Swami that I can no longer live here like this. I want to go back because my Swami who plays with me, who talks to me, who smiles at me, is always available to me wherever I am. But I am not able to see this Swami. So I will be happy with my Swami. I just seek permission to leave and go and live in Guntur. Now, somewhere around Guntur, I guess. There was a mischievous smile on Swami's face. He says, ask him to come up. But he was not in a position to let go so easily. See, this is where, you see Lord, and we're talking about the weak, the person who knows that he's trying to bargain with the Lord. Now, what exactly? There is Shama from the Lord, but he has to get rid of that agony too in his heart. How does he get over that? He from downstairs, he sends a message, ask Swami if I can come every morning, early in the morning, and this is the same back routine, back to the same, and take Vad Namaskar. He says, then the messenger goes up and tells Swami. Swami says, okay. And then Swami gives a mischievous smile. He comes down. Okay, now come up. He says, no, ask Swami if in the evening also I am the last person who's going to escort him. And then every meal session, and then this session, and that session, all my old privileges on my privilege card, will they be restored?
Must be restored.
Exactly. Should be restored or not. And then Swami had enough of this to and fro, and he said, tell him all that was there previously and much more is ascertained, is guaranteed. That is when, with that heavy heart and sighing every step, he climbs onto the upper floor. And as he looks at Swami, he breaks down. His tears start coming, and holding Swami's feet, he tells, how could you do that to me? How could you do that to me? And Swami is like looking at him. Aipoindi kada Rama Brahma. Aipoindi kada inka machipo. Forget, it's over. It's done and dusted. Forget it. How could you do that, Swami? Was it my mistake really? And he was trying to. That agony was coming out, and at that point in time, Swami creates vibhuti with the hand facing upwards. Normally he does it like this. Hand facing up, a heap of vibhuti, rubs on his back, trying to calm him, and then tells him, Bangaru, realize whatever Swami does, adini manchi kosame chestaru anuko. Realize that it is done for your good. The message is, at that level of body consciousness, or when we are the weaker, we think we are weak, the ability to convince ourselves that it is a broader plan of God. Surrender is the only Shama. To surrender and say, Lord, whatever has happened is your will and is good for me. That becomes Shama at some level. And I thought this was an apt thing to share at this point in time, which throws light in a different dimension.
Let me ask you all another flavor to this Shama going on. See, that discussion happened from the previous thought that suppose I did something which has hurt the other person, and over the period of time I reconciled, maybe I matured, I grew up, whatever happens, and then I not only forgive things, I forgive myself, kind of scenario. What happens to the consequence of the person whom I have hurt? So in a simple way, question is, what is the relationship of Shama versus law of karma? You have done the action, and today you are saying forgiveness. It's like, you commit 100 mistakes and now you say, I have become a saint. So chuhe kha ke billi chali haj ko. So the point is, what is this relationship between that? How do you look at Shama versus that act, and what should be your response?
I will just start this, and then probably Hemant and Ranganath can pick up from there. A very important statement that Swami made is, and especially for the students, he told, it is not enough if you are good inside your heart. You should also appear to be good. And at a very gross level, that is what it boils down to. That if I hurt somebody, and if I forgive myself at a very higher level, and I'm in peace with myself, have I justified the other half of the statement? Have I made sure that the other person also knows that I have sort of made amends? And the best way to do that is go and seek forgiveness if it starts to that level. Because everyone is not Swami to know what is going on in our heart. If I hurt someone, it is my duty, it is my responsibility that I go and set the record straight. go and seek forgiveness. And that is the most fundamental thing that Swami expected from all of us. And the very powerful, it's not enough if I'm good. I should also appear to be good. Anything to that effect that needs to be done has to be done. If I have spoken a harsh word, apologize. If I have done a wrong deed, do a deed. It cannot be undone, but at least make sure that the person is comfortable or has realized that I'm repenting or I'm apologetic to what I have done. These are the steps I must make sure that at least at the physical level and at a mental level, things are set straight. Yeah.
Hemant,
I
I'm
think,
just opening the floor. Anybody?
yeah. I think that's a beautiful point, Jagdish, and you cannot you cannot just go about behaving. I mean, I cannot go about behaving how I want, hurting people, and then saying to myself, "I forgive myself." That is very superficial. In fact, that is no forgiveness at all. Kshama doesn't exist on its own. There has to be daya. These two are there's always a play of both daya and kshama. So if someone who has daya will not do this kind of uh, hurting others and then saying to himself, I have forgiven myself. I think forgiving ourselves is not allowing our mind to inflict pain upon ourselves, not thinking that we are infallible, not continuously hurting ourselves thinking we are sinners, letting go and saying that is past, I will move on, I will learn from those mistakes, but I have to move on. I cannot keep dwelling on that. Like you're carrying a luggage, once you sit on a bus you don't need to still carry it on your head, you have to put it down. So you have experience it's over. So of course we cannot just say life goes on and forget about what we have done. We should always remember that the mistake and not repeat it. That goes with it, but not continuously hurting ourselves and looking down upon ourselves. Like Bhagwan says in Gita, uddhared atman atmanam natmanam avasadayet. You yourself are your own friend, you yourself are your own enemy. You can uplift yourself, you can put yourself down. So don't keep hurting yourself. So hurting oneself is the opposite of kshama. So you have to forgive yourself means you are not forgiving yourself just superficially and still going about doing everything uh, and hurting people. No, it's not hurting oneself. Like letting go of that dehabhimana, that someone has hurt me, I have to retaliate. No, letting go of that and forgiving, I think I look upon that. So when karma comes, I will accept it for the deeds that I have done. The ability to accept the result of what is happening to you and say, yes, this could be my karma, and still having faith in God, having faith in Bhagwan, that is the true exhibition of Kshama. And Swami puts that on a very high pedestal. The role of Kshama in the evolution of a devotee. And I want to quote this from Swami's discourse in May 29, 2000. He says, there is a lot of difference between mere patience and Kshama. People often mistake one for the other. Kshama is the golden virtue that enables you to face with equanimity all difficulties, troubles, obstacles, losses, suffering, calumny. The world is not aware, but it is because of Kshama that Swami generously forgives and forgets all the misdeeds done against him. Without Kshama, it would not be possible to put up with even for a moment what is going on around. Yet, Swami is so forgiving that he tolerates every mistake, including very big ones, which is possible only when there is Kshama. It is Swami's Kshama that will bring the whole world to him. So, this is Swami talking about Kshama as something beyond just patience. It is the ability to forgive others and ability to accept difficulties when they happen to you and not blame the world, not blame your karma, not blame others for what is happening. Still holding on to Swami as this is your prasadam, this is for my own good, as Jagdish was saying. And that is what Kshama gives us. You
I
know,
think you brought a very beautiful aspect that once you are in that mindset of Shama, then even if the consequence which falls on you, the way you will accept it or react to that will be different.
yeah,
There will be much more openness, acceptance, and there will be no resistance to that.
yeah,
So if it has come
Yes.
back to me as a consequence of my previous karma, the way I will accept that and react to it will be much different if I did not have Kshama as an
So in
attribute.
one of the discourses, Swami narrates a story in which Buddha happened to visit. I'm sure all of us would have heard this story. Buddha visits a village, and everyone is inviting Buddha uh, uh, for a for a lunch session at their houses. And but Buddha accepts the invitation of one lady whose character is of questionable nature, and the headman of the village approaches Buddha reverentially and says, Lord, you are a man of handsome physique. It would not be appropriate for you to accept such an invitation. So kindly rethink. And it would not be appropriate for you to have lunch at someone who has sinned. That is when Buddha holds, as Swami explains the discourse, he holds with a loving gesture the one hand of the gentleman and he says, "Now you clap." And the gentleman smiles and says, "How is it possible? I cannot clap with one hand." And Buddha answers back saying, "It is because of the men of such nature that this woman ended up sinning. It is all the both the men of this village and the nature of this lady, both are responsible for the sin to have occurred. You cannot clap with one hand." And Swami, so when I read this, initially it appeared to be an anecdote that Swami is narrating, but when I read it 3 4 times, and there's one statement which Swami says, that is why every occurrence cannot happen without two hands. I never understood for some time, but when I meditated, that is when it struck me that Swami was using that anecdote to convey a very powerful lesson. If something is happening to ourselves, to our life, it is because of, it's like that two hands. No, you are now a victim because of something else that has happened some time ago, or it is not of helplessness. It is, I mean, when you have this knowledge that yes, this is of some other nature, of some other consequence that I'm suffering, I'm undergoing this. And you have, Swami goes on to explain at later point of in the discourse, he says that acceptance sets in. If one very clear philosophy that you would observe in most of Swami's discourses is, he would draw it back to the love. And usually this love would be tied back to love of God. I was wondering, why is it that and Swami ties it back always to love and love of God. And I think I found this answer in this discourse where he says the easiest way to develop Shama is to have love for God. And he explains, he says, why is it so? He says, when you have love for God, you start seeing that same Lord in everyone. And it becomes a natural habit for you to not hate your loved one in that particular individual. Automatically, hatred in your mind disappears, and Shama becomes an outcome. That ability to, and he also goes on to say, imagine if you are looking at someone and he has harmed you, you would think that that particular person is my Lord in that form and he is giving me this as a prasadam. So your forbearance and the ability to forgive, both of them go up. But the provision is the love for Lord. And he gives an example of Draupadi. You look at the way in which Draupadi's character got transformed. It was Draupadi who goes on when she was disrobed in Mahabharata in the court of Duryodhana. She was the one who enraged all her husbands. She was the one who instigated their passions, and that is when Bhima took a vow saying that I will annihilate all these 100 fellows. Arjuna takes a vow that I will annihilate Karna, and everybody goes on a rampage of vows. And this is the same lady who, being attached to Krishna for 13 years, undergoes the most extreme pain that a mother can ever undergo, where her entire the progeny is killed. 5 of her children are killed for no mistake of this. And yet, this is the same lady who goes and tells Krishna that the perpetrator is right in front of her. She tells him that, Lord, please forgive him. Look at the transformation of this character. And Swami goes on to add that is because her intense love for Krishna and love for God is the transforming agent for a human to naturally develop this Kshama and uh, and also there's a way of overcoming this act of consequences. But I would request Brother Jagdish to add more.
I will just join here to exactly bring another aspect to this point that you mentioned. Swami once called the teachers for an interview and he asked a question. The question was, do you know how bad Yudhishthira felt when he got to know that Karna was his brother? And the everyone for a moment was silent, because the typical conclusion to this story is Kunti, that Kunti hid this fact and because of her all that this happened. But Swami spun the story in a totally different way. He said, how bad will you all feel when you all realize that you are also brothers with whom you have been fighting all this while? And just imagine what tangent he took. He said, you have been fighting with one person for such a long time. The day that realization strikes you that he is also my brother, he's talking about a different level, that he is also a part of me. Brotherhood of man and fatherhood of God, what Swami very beautifully mentioned so many times. That dimension, and at that point in time, we do not really see another as separate, an object of hatred. It is just one thing, and the only one thing that binds us is love. And that was a very beautiful message sort of Swami shared.
Wow.
Beautiful.
I think it's a very powerful example you gave.
Beautiful. Yes.
Raju, just now you mentioned Draupadi's story. I'm just curious. A thought has come to me, so I'm just asking you this. Yes, Krishna comes to Draupadi, and she's angry at that moment because she has been disrobed. She's literally in fire. She wants everybody to be killed, revenge to be taken. And Krishna comes, and first thing he tells her, Draupadi, whatever you're saying up to happen to her, then it will happen. But I want you to do first one thing for me. And he, after a little dialogue, he says, forgive them. And Draupadi is shocked, obviously. Then Krishna said, no, first you forgive, then everything else will happen. So ultimately, as you rightly have said, that the love for Lord in her was higher than anything else. So because she loved Krishna so much, she said, okay, if you say, I forgive them. And then obviously Krishna says, now they will be killed. And they'll be killed exactly the way you have said. And the difference is, they'll be killed not because they have disrobed you or they have disrespected you. They'll be killed because of their own actions. But if you would have instigated everybody and taken a revenge, then their death would have become consequence of your own karmic action and you would all get trapped. But now after forgiving, you are clean and you are only doing your duty to fight. That's how the Krishna asked Arjun to fight and everybody. So go and kill. That's fine. So this is a part of beautiful like Shama, which power of Shama, that you let go. But I'm just getting a thought. What was the state of mind of Draupadi when she says, I forgive? Did she forget her insult? Did she compromise with herself? Can you shed a light on what does forgiveness give to that person? A person like Draupadi, who suffered for no apparent reason from her side. And now we say, forgive, and they will face the consequence which happened. So I'm very curious to know your thoughts on what is the state of the person who has done Shama. Is it forgetfulness? Is it compromise? Is it adjustment? Or is it something beyond?
There's a quote in which Swami beautifully captures what you said. Swami says, self lives in getting and forgetting. Love lives in giving and forgiving. So the act of Kshama, when it is, when it is emanating from the idea of self, it is not complete. It is a charade. It is momentary. It is not sustainable, because Self lives in getting and forgetting. If you want to forget an incident, and if you call that a Shema, it is not Shema. Love lives in giving and forgiving. Swami gives three criteria in a discourse in which he says prapatti, sharanagati, kshama creates prapatti or sharanagati, and he says how do you know that you have attained this prapatti or sharanagati? He gives three criteria, important criteria. One, always giving. You would give. Second, fearless. You would not have fear. Third, absence of selfishness or complete selflessness. Now, if we use these three criteria to measure Draupadi's or in the victim's reaction, it would give a very clear indication as to whether that action is emanating from love as Kshama or from self as forgetting. So in this aspect, in this particular situation where assuming there are two sets of people, one person, one entity is Draupadi, who kind of forgave those perpetrators because of Krishna, and other is our man Dhritarashtra, the old blind man, who apparently reconciled with what happened. But when the moment came, when he went on to hug, initially, as one of the poet describes, he out of that sheer wisdom of Vidura, he wanted to hug Bhima and appreciate him as another a valorous individual. But as Bhima approached him, rather, as they were saying, as he was able to hear those footsteps of Bhima approaching him, that attachment overpowers him, and in an instant, that ability to appreciate turns into sheer hatred, and that is when he wanted to crush Bhima, and Krishna steps in and stops him, and we know the story. Now, why I'm saying that is, if we compare these two characters of Draupadi and of Dhritarashtra, when they were inflicted with points of choice, both of them exhibited a very different reaction. Draupadi was given a situation where her children were killed, and she exhibited the quality of forgiveness naturally. Dhritarashtra was also given a similar situation, but look at Dhritarashtra's reaction. And we know the consequences of both. What did they undergo? And Hemant is an expert in.
I don't, Raju, I don't think we have shared that story when Draupadi's children were killed. And I don't know who was the person who tells we should revenge, and Draupadi forgives them at that moment. She makes a statement. I don't mind you telling the story quickly about that so that people get a perspective about
Hemant,
how
would you?
did Draupadi react to that situation.
Yeah, sure. So this is from the Sauptika Parva of Mahabharata, where the sleeping Parva, or the what happens to the people who are sleeping. That's the meaning of Sauptika. So this is after Duryodhana has been defeated by Bhima. He's lying down and he's almost on his deathbed. There are still like three warriors left on the Kaurava side: Kritavarma, Ashwathama, and Kripacharya.
Kripa.
So they come to meet Duryodhana. The angst of Duryodhana, even in his deathbed, he is not ready to let go. That revenge mentality is still there. The Swami, we're talking about Kshama. This was the complete opposite of Kshama. Even on his deathbed, he's still thinking he is the one who is wronged. And so he crowns Ashwathama as the commander-in-chief. There are just three people, and Ashwathama is crowned as the commander-in-chief of the Kaurava army. And that night, he goes attacking the Pandavas when they're sleeping. Luckily, Krishna has moved all of them to the Kaurava camp. Not all of them, but the Pandavas, Satyaki, and Krishna are in the Kaurava camp. And so there are Panchalas, which is all of Draupadi's family, her
5
brothers,
children.
and the 5 children, Shikandi, Drishtadyumna, all of them are sleeping, and this Ashwathama goes like the angel of death, and he just massacres them in their sleep. So when they come back, Pandavas hear of this. Draupadi in the initially she says, "Go get him and find him," and she collapses. And so Dharmaja also loses his school and so Bhima rushes to capture Ashwatthama, and then Krishna says, "No, he has the very powerful weapon Brahmastra, so we better go and save Bhima." So Arjuna and Krishna follow him, and anyway, so the confrontation is they capture him, and he releases Brahmastra. Arjuna releases Brahmastra, and they're able to take it back. Krishna saves Parikshit. That's all the side story. But the important one is when they capture him and bring him, Draupadi then forgives him. Then she thinks about Kripi,
Creepy.
who is Kripacharya's, sorry,
Dronacharya's.
Ashwatthama's mother,
yeah, Ashwatthama's mother, and she says he is your preceptor,
Dronacharya's wife. Dronacharya's wife
Dronacharya's
is
wife, and
Kripi.
she says forgive. Arjuna is not ready to let go. None of them are ready to let go, but the mother has that ability to forgive. That's why Swami says divine love is closest to a mother's love, and he compares nothing else to divine love other than a mother's love, and you get a number which is like many times mother's love is God's love, but the only thing that comes closest to divine love is mother's love. It has that ability, to be so loving and tender on that object, on like the child, but it
So
can be
selfless.
but it can be infinitely tyrannical on itself. The mother's love has that. It doesn't matter what happens to me, nothing should happen to my child. Every mother knows this, and every child knows this. Like, your mother sits all through the night for you, doesn't care for her sleep when the child is sick. And that is the mother's love. It doesn't matter what the child is, how many of mistakes he does, the mother is ready to forgive. It can hurt, it can kick, it can do anything as a baby and as an adult, but the mother always forgives. Yes, of course, it wants justice and all that stuff, but the most important quality of mother's love is the ability to just forget whatever the child has done, and just love them unconditionally. And that is the quality, I think, of divine love that comes about with kshama, this growing kshama. And in Krishna's life we see this kshama. In Rama's life also we see this kshama. When he forgives Vibhishna, when he forgives Sugriva, he's ready to forgive Ravana also. It's if he comes and surrenders and gives Sita to me, I'll go back. So that is the level of. In Swami's life also there are telling examples of kshama when he was a young boy, and we will discuss that as we go about. But I just wanted to, as you said, narrate the story of Ashwatthama and how
Yeah, because it's
Draupadi.
a very important point. When Draupadi says, I forgive them because I can't let another mother
Yes.
face the
Go through
same
that.
pain that I have already suffered.
Well, an incident
So
just
I
comes to
think
my
when I
mind.
ask this question, now it makes some sense, because the transformation of Draupadi at that moment when she says, I forgive, was not temporary or was not a lip service.
Yes.
It had been a transformation of a soul. Even then, when she lost all her sons, she still had that ability to let go. And that's a phenomenal point.
I'll just
Sorry,
add
yes.
one thing here, brother.
Yeah.
Sorry, Raju. I just
No,
finish
go on,
this
go
and
on.
I'll hand it over to you. The reason why I interjected is basically based on what you and Hemant just now brought about. Sometimes so, for example, Krishna told Draupadi, her commitment to following his words was implicit, and that is what Swami expects us. Sometimes when Swami says, I want you to love everyone, he knows for sure that next moment we will not be Buddhas or Christs. But the switch has been turned on. It will take some slow rounds, and at some point in time it will gain full speed and it will start running like a normal fan. But there is a gestation period. There is a time for that to happen, and he's aware. What he expects from us is that commitment at that point. Am I available or not? Exactly. To do that. If you look at the point that Ranganath just now brought up, the company, what kind of what role it plays. Two again striking characters from the Mahabharata. Duryodhana, the kind of company he kept. On his deathbed, what is going on in his mind? He convinces Ashwatthama with the logic of Kak Uluka Nyaya. the wisdom
What
of
is
the
that?
crow.
Come again?
Kaka uluka nyaya. Kak means crow, and uluka is an owl. He
Owl.
says, yeah, in the daytime, when the owls cannot see, the crows come and kill their young ones or destroy their eggs. At night, when the crows cannot see and they are asleep, the owls go and attack them. So he gives this shastric, this injunction, and he tells him, use this logic and destroy the Pandavas when they'll be asleep, because in daytime we cannot defeat them. This is what his mind is hatching.
Wow.
Another character, Bhishma, who's retired, or rather who's basically incapacitated in the war, and he's counting his final days. He's on his deathbed. And that point in time when Krishna takes the Pandavas and the Shanti Parva to him to learn the wisdom which he had gained from Brihaspati, the preceptor of the gods, Draupadi laughs. So the switch was turned on, but it was not that the transformation was complete. It was a journey. And when she laughs, Bhishma asks him, why are you laughing? And her answer was, I'm wondering where was all that wisdom when I was being dishonored in the court. Now you are teaching all of that, but where did that wisdom go? When I was being dishonored, you didn't speak a word, you were standing there. And he said, my blood had the salt of Duryodhana. What we eat, how much it influences. And I was in some sort indebted to him. Now, after Arjuna shot all those sharp shafts into my body, that impure blood has drained out. And this fresh blood is giving that wisdom, because of which I'm able to tell you all of that. And he ends with one very beautiful song. He says, I am alive until now because my mind is fixated on that one person whose last glimpse I want to have before I leave. Where is he hiding? Krishna was actually standing behind him. That is when Krishna comes in front, and what Bhishma tells is a song in the Pushpa Chandas. He sings a song, Iti Mati Pati. So I'll not go into the whole song. What the line means is, I have a daughter who needs to get married, and I'm searching for an ideal groom for that daughter. And Krishna looks at him and says, all that we know is Krishna knew everything, but he just wanted the others to know. You are a bachelor. When did you have a daughter? And then Bhishma folds his hand and says, oh Lord, this mind, iti mati, this mati, which is my mind, is my daughter. And I want to find an ideal groom for that mind. Who can be a better groom than you? I want to offer this mind at your lotus feet. And those are the last words he utters, and then he parts. So two contrasting characters when we talk about
Beautiful.
Shama.
Do
One
you know
person
this
is
line?
the
Do you remember this full line? Iti mati?
Iti mati pati sang satrishna means it's a long song. It's possibly available. You can Google it. It's in this the Pushpa Chandas, they call it. He sings it, and since it is Pushpa Chandas, he sang it because it was Vasanta Ritu, Uttarayana had come, and he thought it was an opportune moment to give up his body. All those things coincided. But the beautiful part was that a mind that surrendered or constantly thought of the Lord, how does it behave even at its last moment vis-a-vis the mind which has always been plotting, which is Duryodhana at that point in time. And the company that Raju mentioned is so very important. When you dwell constantly on that Lord, it makes all these qualities like Shama, like Prema, very natural.
But Jagdish brought out a very important point. It just kind of triggered one memory. The fact that in one discourse, Swami mentions that one of the rarest species in this creation is human, and then he goes on to explain as to why is it so. We have read that human is the only creature who can appreciate music. It is the only creature who can tell stories. These are the definition given by scientists, but at a human perspective. But the Lord's perspective is very different. He says it is human alone whose heart is endowed with qualities of, and he quotes 6, but in that 3 important are prema, kshama, and daya. But a mruga, and he goes on to explain manava and mruga. Mruga is an animal, a beast. It is not endowed with daya. And the next sentence that follows is, that is why Swami keeps saying that it is food habits should be regulated, non-veg should be avoided. The inherent ability to forgive comes from the food that is taken. Because a mruga, why is mruga not able to forgive? It is because the food is being consumed. When it is consumed, that object of the consumption is undergoing extreme pain, and that is passing through you. And you mentally, you kind of become resist to feel that pain. Eventually, that gets reflected on others. So that ability to forgive someone automatically gets eroded in your personality. This is one point, and that is why I think Bhishma kind of emphasizes. And another point, brother, is you asked an important question about the consequence. If you look very closely, in fact, Swami had revealed to one of our brothers also that single act of three people, Ashwathama, Kritavarma, and Krupacharya, going in the night and killing, it had immense effect on each of these three in an extremely different manner. It came back to each of them in a devastating manner. We know the consequences of what happened to Ashwathama. All of us know the story. But another cruel character in this along with Ashwathama was Krutavarma. He was supposed to be fighting. I mean, at one point of time, he did not want to fight against Krishna, but somehow something happened, and then he agrees to fight on the Kaurava side. And the poems describe that it seems when they realize that a massacre is happening, Ashwatthama is massacring people in the tent. So some of them get up and they rush outside. And they say, the poems goes on to describe that it seems Krutavarma's hand was so firm that the sword, he was holding the sword right at the entrance, that as they were rushing out, their bodies were getting split and they were falling dead. And Krutavarma is apparently enjoying this massacre. This single act at the end, when the entire Yadava family, when the entire Yadava clan was brought together, Krutavarma drinks, he loses his senses, and he starts recounting that massacre as to how he massacred those foolish, helpless Pandavas, and that enrages Satyaki. And Satyaki kills Krutavarma, and eventually the entire Yadava clan is wiped out. Imagine that single act of hatred towards Pandavas, or rather, that lack of Shama of Krutavarma came back after so many years and wiped out an entire clan. And we know what happened to Krupacharya. Krupacharya is, in fact, one of the very few Chiranjeevis who is left to live long. Most of the Chiranjeevis who have lived have had a purpose. For example, even though Ashwadama had done this, he repents. He goes to Vyasa and he repents, and then Ashwadama is supposed to be the next Vyasa. He is allowed to recall the
Pen
stories,
down the story. Yeah.
pen down the stories of the humanity. But it is only Krupacharya who is taunted and traumatized by that incident, that the description goes on to say that he is yet not able to concentrate his mind in spite of so many years of sadhana. Only a spiritual sadhaka understands the pain of it. You are not able to get your mind under your control because it has been traumatized so much with that massacre. And it's a living hell. Only sadhaka can understand the pain of it.
Yeah, I think as you're talking about this
Raju.
example, the end of the Yadava clan, there's an example of Shama there. Like, so whenever Pandavas have a problem, they'll put Krishna in the front. You take the brunt of it. So after the war, Krishna is sent to meet Dhritarashtra and Gandhari and console them. So he consoles them that night. He comes back, and this massacre has happened. Anyway, later on they all go with the Pandavas. Krishna goes and meets them, and then Dhritarashtra tries to kill Bhima in his anger. That happens, but then the real pain is expressed by Mother Gandhari, and she holds Krishna responsible for all of this. Like he has not harmed anyone, but he is the one who has instigated. She complains and she says, "You have instigated these Pandavas to do this, and now I am not a single son is alive. Could you not spare? Could you not see goodness even one son?" She asks. Very painful words. Krishna is just accepting all of this, and then in that anger, she curses him.
Curses him.
Your clan is going to be wiped out. And then he smiles and says, "Yeah, I'm fine. I will take it. I will accept it." The immense kshama. No, these are like instances of kshama. He doesn't retaliate. He's not the one who has done this harm. They were the ones who did it, and they got back what the Kauravas got back that. But when she curses him and says, "Okay, we were thinking how we will exit this world. Your curse has come as a blessing." That's what he says. It has already been decided, and he smilingly takes that. I think in the lives of Avatar, these are the beautiful instances in Rama's and Krishna's life. I want to go to Swami's life too. Like in his early childhood, uh, Swami had finished his schooling, I think, till fourth
Hemant,
grade. Yes.
Hemant, just let me add one incident and then you take, because it just sets to the mother one and
Yeah.
it connects to Swami,
Continue.
so that it sets stage for you. When you're recollecting about mother, this this incident struck me. During our college days, all of us had fans. I mean, we had that fancy outlook towards Western authors, and Dostoevsky was one of the favorite. In which one of the novels, he writes a line about a mother telling her child that you cannot hurt me unless and until you hurt yourself.
Yeah.
So that line somehow stayed very long with me, and I had translated this into Telugu and we had used in one of the dramas for one of the Partiyatras. So the Partiyatra drama is presented. Swami gave a beautiful look during that dialogue, and at the end, as he was blessing the participants with photographs, he tells me he's recalling that line, and he tells me, even it is same for Swami. You cannot hurt Swami unless and until you hurt yourself and also others. And he walked away. So
That's
yeah, over to you, Hemant.
so
Beautiful.
that's the play of Daya and Kshama. It's such a synthesis in Swami in Avatar's life, and that's why he puts these two on a pedestal. Love is expressed as Daya, love is expressed as Kshama. That's how, I mean, love is a very intangible thing. It becomes abstract to us when we say you need to love everyone. How does it? What do you mean you need to love everyone? How do you? I can't go around saying I love you, I love you. That is meaningless, I think. I think it has to be expressed as Daya and as a Kshama. The two sides of the of divine selfless love is Daya and Kshama. Beautiful, I think, a very nice experience, Raju. Swami uh, sort of confirming what
Yes.
As we are discussing, I want to share this line. As we say, love as the basis, because there is, as you are rightly highlighting this beautiful thing that Shama and Daya and all that is an offshoot expressions of that being, which is love. So the core itself is love, and then the expression. And in that, what you have brought out is a very beautiful thing. All encompassing acceptance, is there. So when he says, do whatever, you are still mine. As the God, he says, you're always mine. Whether you curse me, you go away, whatever you do, drama. So acceptance at any cost is an absolute amazing expression of daya from Bhagwan. And then the supreme ability to let go. We say, Swami, I want to do this, I want to, achieve, help this and work here and do some ambition. And he says, do. Even though he knows that this is not good for you, but that is okay. The let go is Shama. So what a beautiful, you have presented this case. And as you had already said, I wanted to share this slide with you all. So, attribute of a divine love, you say selfless, fearless, and changeless. From where everything else shoots. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah,
And
I
Hemant
think
was
that's a
talking about
very,
Swami's love.
very nice segue to Swami's childhood, fearless and changeless and selfless. Beautiful. So I was reminded of how Swami exhibited this Shama and taught Shama at a very young age. So he was he was sent with his brother Sheshamaraju to Kamalapuram to study middle school there. And there, his brother would go on teacher's training. He would be away from the house, and Swami has put through a lot of physical difficulties there. He was the only male member there, and he had to carry water like 2 kilometers. He has to go fetch water morning once and evening once, and he would carry it on a stick with two pots hanging, and they would leave a scar there, and he would be physically beaten sometimes if he didn't do his work. It was a very painful, very, very painful time. So uh, once it happened that they had to go to Pushpagiri for the cattle fair. All the children were going there. All his classmates were going there. Swami didn't have money, and he didn't know what to do. So he feigned that he had a stomach pain, and they all left without Swami. And then Swami felt that they were missing him, so he decided, what do I do? I need to have some money, because you need to pay like 12 annas for the bus charge and staying there, all that stuff. So he takes his books, which he has never used at all, because he knows everything. He doesn't have to use them. He goes and sells these books, and the boy says, okay, I can give you 10 annas for this. Swami says, I don't need 10 annas, just give me 5 annas, because I plan to walk and come back. These are reused books. So that boy himself, who is very poor, he gives Swami those 5 annas, which are, he gives them in much smaller denomination. They're called bottus. Okay. Dhammidis and bottus. So he gives like a big, like in a cloth, he gives those thing. And Swami gets that in a cloth, and the cloth is so old and tattered that when he reaches home, it tears and all the coins fall down. And then the lady of the house, she says, you have stolen it. You have stolen this money from somewhere, and she gives a thrashing, little thrashing. And Swami has no money now. And so he decides, okay, I will walk. We will see what happens. He walks to the fair. And that's a beautiful story. You have to watch Brother Prem and Arvind narrate this on Satya to Sai series on Radio Sai.
Yeah,
Very
it's a
beautiful.
fantastic series.
Anyway, coming to the Shama aspect, there he participates in the fair, and when he's coming back, he decides to buy something for his sister-in-law, and so he buys some flowers, and he comes home and he hears that they're expecting a child. Which they come, he comes to know that, and his brother is very livid, because he says, you have left your sister-in-law and gone. You are supposed to be here. And he takes a ruler, which a wooden stick, and beats Swami left and right. And Swami is like really hurt. Then it gets bandaged, and then later on they have a miscarriage. The sister-in-law has a miscarriage, so Swami's parents are called, telling of this miscarriage. So father comes. They don't know that Swami is being beaten up so badly. He comes just thinking there is this miscarriage to deal with, and then the neighbors call him and say, "What, Pedda Venkamaraju, you don't have money to take care of your child, that you're leaving him here. You feed him whatever you can." So, and see how they're treating him. And then the father calls Satyam and Swami, and he says, are they hitting you like this? Are they treating you like this? What is all this? Swami says, no, I just fell down and got hurt. He just then he says, I will take care of you. I come home with me. And then Swami says this statement, says, no, if I come home now with you, the neighbors will, it will prove what the neighbors said was right, and it will bring a bad name to my brother. I cannot come home with you. I will be here. After some time, you can come here. And now is the time that I cannot leave them. No, they're going through difficulty. They have had a miscarriage. I cannot leave them and come now. You go, I will come. And that brings tears to the father's eyes. These people have beaten him, hurt him so badly. And this is Swami showing the Kshama. And that aspect of changeless, this was not just when he was just a child, many years later. In fact, very recently I was watching this video of this Murali Mohan, who played the role of Sheshamaraju in uh, Swami's depiction of Swami's life. Shirdi Sai Parthi Sai, a Telugu serial Swami blessed
Yes,
by
yes.
Anjali Devi to this thing. So Murali Mohan was playing the role of Sheshamaraju in that, Swami's elder brother. And so Swami called him and said, "My brother didn't have a mustache. If you don't mind, can you remove it?" He said, "Yes, Swami, why? You just have to order." And then Swami also added, they may ask you to show my brother in a very demeaning way. Please try to make it dignified. Don't show it in a demeaning way. His family is there, his children are there, his grandchildren are there. They will not like to see it like that. That is the changeless, selfless love that Swami is. It is not just some many years back. This was, I didn't know of this at all. I mean, see, these two are not related. I was just reading this and then remembered I heard of that. That is Swami Kshama. It is incessant. It always is there, and it is for us to observe that and sort of learn from that. That is that just shook me. That Kshama that he had, and he just went under. Then when he was put through a lot of torture, they I think they assumed, the family was so scared. He's saying he's Sai Baba. Who is this Sai Baba? It was unknown to them. And so many people were coming and saying, no, this is a ghost. And so they took him to Kadri, where they put him under physical torture, and they tonsured his head. They put some scars on the head. They poured garlic and uh, ginger and lemon paste onto that, thinking that the ghost will leave because of the pain that is afflicted to the body. And then they smeared some chili paste into his eyes. Swami's, even in that, when they asked who he is, he said, "I am Sai Baba." That's all. That is that. It is fearless. Who are you means I am that divinity. It doesn't change. That aspect of selfless, fearless, and changeless, that is seen in Swami's life, just like as it is seen in the avatars of Rama, Krishna, seen in the life of Jesus. Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they are doing. The Kshama comes out in Swami's life, and that is what makes a human into a divine. Like, we go back again, what makes human love divine is this Daya and this Kshama. I think Raju also has some beautiful experiences from Swami's life of forgiveness and Kshama, again from Swami's earlier
I love.
days.
Thank you, Hemant, for bringing this beautiful stories. Because when you see changeless of Bhagwan, I have seen from the day one he started the school, he has been training the students in the same manner. Till the last, he did the same thing. Every year by year, he never changed. His persistence, his consistency was amazing. And that is why he lived a life with such a perfection that he could lead with example to all the generations. Can you believe that? That is changelessness, right? Such a
Yes,
phenomenal.
just to add what Hemant was saying, even in his early days of avatarhood, when Swami had just declared his avatarhood, and various people from the village are inviting him for food. One lady invites him for food. All of us know the story, but she adds poison to the vadas, and his body turns blue. And when people realized that Swami had been poisoned, they wanted to thrash her, they wanted to punish her. But it was Swami who actually stood between that lady and the mob. He stops everybody else at them, saying that if you have to hurt her, first you have to hurt me. And then he makes sure that the lady is safe for rest of her life. In fact, there's one beautiful discourse. Swami is a great teacher. If you observe him closely, if you pay attention to the messages that he's conveying, at one stroke he conveys multiple messages. I remember very clearly the discourse which Hemant was recalling, and I happened to sit in the first few lines. In fact, the first line, and Swami narrated this entire story of how he went to Pushpagiri, how he returned back, and he brought that turmeric and also the flowers for his for a sister-in-law to be, because she's just about to deliver. And then Swami says that his brother came out with a ruler and hit him so hard on his knees. It was very painful. And then I remember very clearly the next line he adds. He says very dispassionately, he added, said, and next day a dead child was born. The pain inflicted came back in another way. It is not,
Oh,
if you observe, because it took, initially I thought maybe Swami is of, no, of revenge, but it took some time for me to realize that he is the same dispassionate Lord. He is just that mere Sarvadi Sakshibhutam. He is an eternal witness. And it is that action of inflicting pain came back to that family in some other way. And in another discourse, he was openly talking about. I'm sure all of us would have heard that discourse where he talks about Ishwarama coming in the night and warning Swami that Swami, please be careful. There are devotees who are actually coming with the poisoned handkerchiefs. When they offer you handkerchiefs, do not take everyone's handkerchief because there's a poison and they wanted you to fall ill or have problems with the health. And the next few lines in that discourse, 2 lines later, Swami says, and next day when Swami comes, all of them had Amitamaya Anandam Pondar. It is like they are very happy looking at him. All of them, everybody had partaken happiness, very subtly indicating that they came to harm me, but yet this avatar gave them what it is it has come to give. I gave them Anandam in spite of their malicious intent. And this act of giving and forgiving, it goes on. If you look at entire Swami's life, there is nothing else. If you have to call Swami, those are three vows that in which he says that the avatar has taken three vows. Every avatar has different vows, and the first one happens to be, he says, this hand is only meant for giving and giving and giving. And what sort of giving? Brother Satyat recalls in one of the speeches, he says at one point he wanted Swami to kind of ask for a tour or something of that sort, and Swami says, ఇది ఈ శరీరము అలసిపోయిందిరా. This body got tired. It has gone around to every nook and corner of this country and state and this and met so many people that now it is tired. It just shook me because Avatar, the Lord, pushed his physical limits to such an extent that the physicality of the body is now, it is slowly taking a hit. And what is all that for? For that love. And he goes on to add, and there's one more discourse in which, in fact, one of the exchanges with students, in which he says that the boy tells Swami that, Swami, I want to die for you. And Swami says, no, you live for me. And then he holds his boy's hand and says, all that Swami wants is your happiness. You stay happy, and Swami is always happy. And this boy goes on to ask Swami that, Swami, you don't want anything else? And Swami is saying, like, Swami is emphasizing, nijanga cheptu, like as if you tell your friend, you tell your brothers that, no, I'm not jovial. I'm being honest. He says, nijanga cheptunanu. I'm telling you truly, I don't want anything else. I want your happiness, happiness, and happiness. What sort of entity is he? Probably personification of everything that we can ever imagine of.
okay, let me throw one more point for you all. There is also, I think somewhere Bhagavan has also mentioned, as we correlated, Shama comes from giving up your body consciousness, Deha Vimana. And the way to acquire or to get into Deha Vimana is this. So let me show you this. As they say, so requirements for acquiring Shama, which is or to delete Deha Vimana, conscious of purity of material, purity of mind, purity of speech, and purity of action. Have you heard Swami say that?
Yes, brother.
The Patra Paka Padartha Shuddhi that Swami so very often has talked about is something which probably Raju can elaborate more on that and add to it. But that is the first thing that comes to my mind when I see this.
Just to add to this slide, after we had chanced upon this discourse, what struck me is how do we? I mean, we know that purity of material, purity of mind, purity of speech and action enable you to have Shama. Now, to get to the start point as to how do you get this purity, I was behind that. Once you acquire this purity, probably you can percolate the purity into material, mind, speech, and action. But in the initial phase, how do you get purity? And in one of the dramas, I had shared this earlier. There is a context which are written where Kasturi, the character Kasturi, tells the audience that no, Swami, there is no question that Swami has not answered in his discourses. There is no topic that he has not dealt upon. There is no challenge that he has not cut to mudi. There is no knot that he has actually untied in his literature. All that we need to do is read and this is the greatest gift that he has given to humanity. I very clearly, distinctly remember when this dialogue was being said, Swami was, he was nodding like this and he was emphasizing, avunu, like for every line he kept doing that. It was like emphasizing, literally thumping, saying, yes, I have done it. Now, in one of the discourses, Swami so simply he explains, I mean, in such simple words he explains, he says, the way to acquire purity is threefold. He says, when you are able to realize that the same Lord dwells in everyone, when you are able to realize that it is love that sustains everything, and when you are able to realize that it is Daya that is able to hold everyone together, he says automatically purity will set in.
Repeat again. Repeat one by one again.
He says, when you are able to realize that it is the same Lord that dwells in everyone, when you are able to realize it is Shama, when you are able to realize it is Daya that holds everyone, these three qualities, automatically purity sets in.
This is the same question that Parikshit asks Sukha Maharshi, that what is the hallmark of a true devotee? So at the end of the whole Bhagavatam, Sukha tells, there's only one statement. It is seeing God in everything and everything in God is the hallmark of a devotee. It summarizes and what Swami has simplified it in English for us is love all, serve all, help ever, hurt never. That's all it boils down to.
Wow.
Again, beautifully. It
I
comes
tell
back
you,
to that. Yeah.
the
Sorry, go
more
ahead.
and more you think about these things, it sounds so simple, and you wonder why we are finding it difficult to implement it in life. It's fantastic.
One of the things, brother, that is very important. In fact, so beautifully Hemant and Ranganath have put it in. But I was actually stunned to silence just listening to what they were talking so far. If you look at human observation is limited to the material world. Everything is limited to material aspects, and our senses cannot perceive anything beyond the material. Swami, in one of his discourses, talked about the Pancha Mahabhutas and said, Sabda Sparsha Rupa Rasa Gandha, when they combine, that is what earth is. From that, if you remove one aspect, the Rupa, it is water. From water, if you remove one more aspect, it becomes fire. From fire, you remove the heat aspect, it becomes wind. From the wind, if you remove one aspect, it becomes sound. So the ultimate is Sabda Brahmamayi, what Swami has referred to, that everything is sound. And then Swami said, beyond sound, which the scientists have not yet found, is prema. It is the more fundamental, even more fundamental than pranava. And in fact, that is the source of pranava. And then in that discourse, landmark discourse, in fact, Swami kept telling that Satya is my prachara, Dharma is my achara, Shanti is my swabhava, Prema is my swarupa, love is what I am. And that is even more fundamental to the Pancha Mahabhutas. So you can just imagine, we have sort of not even scratched the tip of the mountain or the tip of the iceberg to tell in that form. So it is really mind-boggling. in every possible way.
Beautiful.
Wow.
I think,
I think there is so
Daya
much
and
to
Shama.
contemplate. There is so much to contemplate. Yes, Hemant, sorry.
No, I was just adding to what Jagadish brother was saying. I think Daya and Kshama, it goes when we talk about love, which are the two sides of two aspects of love. But I think they address the same issue, which is dehabhimana. You know, when you get rid of this dehabhimana, or you spread your eye so that it is encompassing everyone around, that becomes Daya. And when you get rid of your own body attachment, your own attachment, dehabhimana, then that becomes Kshama. That means you forget the pain that your body is undergoing, you forget the pain that your mind is facing, then that becomes Kshama. But I think dehabhimana is something that is common, or the lack of dehabhimana is something that is common for both Daya and for Kshama. And we say the night prayer, we say करचरण कृतं वा कायजं कर्मजं वा श्रवणनयनजं वा मानसं वा अपराधं विहितम् अविहितं वा सर्वमेतत् क्षमस्व. So it goes karacharana kritam, whatever I have done with my hands, with my feet, with my mind, with my words, with my thoughts, all of that. The last line is sarvametat kshamasva. Please forgive, dear Lord, all of this. So until this discussion, it always felt to me that this was okay. I did that. You forgive this action. You forgive this. I said. I think the meaning is completely different when we think about dehabhimana. I think we can interpret it as the very fact that I'm thinking I did this. I did this with my hands. I did this with my feet. I did this with my mind. Please forgive that feeling itself, Swami. It is you who is doing all of this, and I forget that
Beautiful.
you are doing this, you are running through me. Please forgive that. I think that is the true forgiveness Swami has come. So he'll keep forgiving. Why is he forgiving? So that you realize that you are not this body, you are not this body, you are that divine being, that you are not doing these things, you are beyond all of this stuff. I think that is the true forgiveness that Swami
Yeah.
I think you brought in a very beautiful perspective to it, Karacharana Kritamba is okay, and the body part of it, and then you to forgive that even this thought itself is wrong, so forgive that. Here I'm just Jagdish, you had brought in this point of deleting process. You remember we're talking about Shama as a point of deleting the memories, and
Yeah.
let's bring that topic in the last few minutes just to discuss that point. So when we say I forgive, so we are actually offloading our memory in a way.
Mhm.
Okay. So it's for a common person to even think that I'm not supposed to depend on memory. Then what do I depend on? Because I won't even know my name if I don't have memory. I will lose all my identity. I know that Mr. Krishnamurti also has this philosophical way of presenting that one should get up in the morning with fresh mind. We always get up with our old garbage of memories and then fight it out again. So he also promotes the same thought. And here we have reached in our discussion that Shama is a process which helps in deleting this memory, so to say. Can you, Jagdish, highlight a little bit what exactly it means and how do we go about?
I'll just try, brother. Let me take you all back to the Dwapara scene when Uttara delivers a stillborn, and Arjuna looks beseechingly at Krishna, and he makes only one statement. He says, "Lord, how do I tell her that the one who's born dead is just the body and not the soul?" Krishna would have
Oh,
really pulled his hair out, because he said, "I spent 18 chapters trying to explain to you the whole Dehadehi concept, and here you are coming back and you're asking me the same question again." He, of course, breathed life into him, and you know the story after that. It's very important that memory is basically a fleeting aspect of our life. There is something which is higher than memory that we need to constantly be aware of and contemplate upon. And that is what forms the more fundamental substratum of existence, and that is awareness. constant integrated awareness is what Swami talks about. To be able to experience that all the time. And one small example, when we were given that wonderful opportunity to be with Swami or accompany Swami in one of the tours, one of the elders came and asked us, have you all packed everything that is needed for the trip? What is the most important thing that you need to take for the trip? They asked us. And we like, sir, probably the vibhuti or the comb, when this is because you have to be presentable in front of Swami. And that elder said, no, your common sense, your awareness. You have to be aware physically all the time. And as much as it is applicable to the real part, that much is it is applicable to the spiritual or the other aspects. Are we even contemplating on that? And one of the reasons, if you look at, even though it might appear metaphorical, look at two very important companions of the Lord in two avatars, Lakshmana in Treta Yuga and Arjuna in Dwapar Yuga. Lakshmana mastered the Atibala mantra, which gives him mastery over sleep. He has to be always aware because he's in the Lord's presence. Arjuna's other name is Gudakesha, the one who has mastered sleep. He is also in the Lord's presence. It is the constant integrated awareness that one needs to have if you want to be in that Lord's presence. And that is that aspect that we all need to sort of work on. That, okay, memory is fleeting. Yes, good and bad. All those are there, long-term, short-term. But if you want to get over that, we have to be aware of everything around us. And that is
Jagadish, I had never heard Gudakesha interpretation this. We always somehow restricted ourselves from the physical point of view, that Arjuna
Yes.
had conquered his sleep. But the other aspect of Gudakesha, that he was aware, is phenomenal. Beautiful. Thank you.
You have to be aware. When Swami basically, I'll keep telling you, kahan se aaya, breakfast kya kiya, kab aaya, kab jata hai. And suddenly in between, he'll throw that one line wherein he shows that omniscience, where he shows what he really is. And if you are asleep at that point in time, you have missed that whole conversation. You have to be aware all the point in time. So these are my thoughts. In fact, the similar thing is about Sabyasachi as well. Sabyasachi at one sense stands for ambidextrousness. That Arjuna was capable of using both the hands to load, to shoot equally. But it also means that when you are ready all the time, it does not matter. When the Lord commands, you don't need to think whether I need to use my left hand or the right hand. You can straight away spring into action. So all these are the aspects that tell us that we have to be aware, ever ready, ever available. And when that happens, then this aspect of memory and all of take a second seat or a back seat. And there's something more powerful. His presence becomes so overpowering and so powerful that all these other things become immaterial.
In one of the discourses, Swami talks about the 4 aspects of mind, and he also goes on to beautifully describe as to what Chitragupta means. We know Yama has an assistant, Kala. That is, other name of Yama is Kala, and that Kala has an assistant called Chitragupta. Chitragupta is known for recording everything that a human has done. So he is recording whatever I have done. He is recording whatever you have. Every single act. It does not go. And Swami goes on to explain. The mind has 4 aspects. One is manas, the operational one. So, do you know how your heart is beating? Do you know there is a Harvard research which is being done saying that our brain has 3 layers, where the initial portion is very similar to the reptile brain, and the middle portion is very similar to the mammal brain, and the top one is the unique part of human brain. So that reptile and mammal one, which is the manas, the operational one, is carried out. And the other important one is chitta. Chitta records everything that undergoes in your life. Every thought, every response that you have been through is recorded dutifully by this chitta. And this chitta, Yajnavalkya explains that this chitta it becomes the basis for your next life. And the only one of the very few ways to cleanse this chitta or to ensure that your response is not added into this chitta is kshama. Let me explain
Oh,
what I mean.
oh,
No,
Beautiful.
there's a book, Many Life, Many Masters, by, I'm not able to recollect the author's name, uh, Brian Weiss,
Brian
in which
Weiss. Yeah.
Brian
Brian Weiss,
Weiss.
yes, in
Brian
which
Weiss.
he
Sorry.
takes, no, there's the first case study of the book starts with one lady having, for some reason, for, I mean, for apparently no reason, she hates someone else, one of her friends, and he takes her back to her past life. She has no reason as to why she is hating that other person. Now she goes back to a time, to a Greek period where the two soldiers were reaching the shore, and the first one gets onto the shore, and he's extending hand to the other one. The other one is just about to come up to the shore, and he mercilessly just slits the throat of the other one, and he runs away for his safety. And while dying, that dying soldier has that angst, has that rage, has that feeling of betrayal. And he says, Brian Weiss got on to explain, he says, that simple act of having that thought of betrayal, having that rage, came back so every life, even to this life, it has come back, and it is causing so much agitation in this particular lady. I think when Swami talks about Kshama, he is at a very physical level. It is for our own well-being that he's talking about. Now I've gone to doctor. I don't know. I don't eat much. I kind of control my food habits, but yet I was told by doctor that there is some problem. It is probably because you are scared, because there's a lot of fear in you that you are actually putting on weight, and it is so true. And when we look back, my father has a nervous problem, and doctors analyzed and said there's nothing wrong with his body, but yet he's not able to forgive certain people in his life, and hence that is affecting his nervous system. And the day he lets go, I think he'll be much better than what he is now. When we read some of his discourse, it makes a lot of sense that when the Lord is saying it, is he's saying actually for our own good, for our own betterment. Leave the spiritual aspect, but at least physically, in our day-to-day life, we will get much better with these qualities of kshama and daya.
So basically, if I have to really put a summary statement, Shama is a process of deleting memory on a physical level. And the imprints even of the memory must not be there. So how do we learn from our experiences? Before you jump into this, I think time is also coming. I have one small, Brother Srinivas has sent something. I wanted to share that. He said, even great rishis, when they become angry over certain actions, are known to have cursed those who did such action. Is it due to lack of forbearance? Shama, how do you look at this?
Can I
It's
add?
a very,
Hemant,
yeah, sure.
uh,
Ranganath, go ahead.
no,
No, I think yes. When you lose your cool, you use your spiritual energy is wasted when you let it flow in anger like that. So it's fair to say, unless there is some divine play behind all of that, when you get angry, when you lose cool at that moment, and but if you forgive later, that may be fine. But if you say something to hurt someone, we say curse. What is this curse? I mean, you can think of curse when you take some water out of kamandalu and you curse. That is different. We curse every day in our daily life, and it is really called a curse also. When you hurt someone with words, that it hurts them, right? You cannot take it back. Physical hurt can be remedied. You can put a balm over it, but hurting with words, that is a lack of kshama, lack of forbearance. You feel that angst that someone has hurt you, someone has pricked your ego. When someone pricks your ego, that's when the anger will come out in that lack of kshama. The moment I have this dehabhimana, that's so much of dehabhimana, that I feel I had to stand up for myself. I need to defend myself. I need to defend what I'm doing. I need to defend what I have said. I become very defensive, and that dehabhimana is what comes out as lack of kshama. So yes, when people curse, when you talk ill, when you talk harsh, when you hurt others with words or actions, it is a lack of kshama which we must definitely control.
Yeah. I'll add one story to this. Swami's Chinnakatha, a yogi who developed that siddhi that he would stare at anything and it would turn to ashes. So after gaining that siddhi, he looks at a bird and it's burned to ashes. So now with that renewed spiritual power, he comes for begging for alms, and he stands in front of a house and he utters thrice and nobody is coming. He thinks in his mind, this lady does not know who I am. And from inside, the response comes, I am no bird perching on a tree that you can reduce to ashes. And suddenly he realizes who this lady is. She was a Gyani herself, but by doing her general normal duty, Prativrata, is what Swami mentions in that story. A state of enlightenment. A spiritual sadhaka is different from an enlightened person. Unless and until he is enlightened, he can come back again and again by making the mistakes and keeps going through this vicious cycle, which prevents him from understanding the ultimate truth. They got the story of Vishwamitra and Vasistha is an example. The story of Parashurama is an example. These are all things said that, showed us that this is still possible, that they could get angry, they could lose their cool, as Hemant beautifully put it, and they too sort of go in circles at some point in time.
So I think we need to make the distinction between this feeling anger and the lack of kshama. Like one of the comments I see is Shirdi Baba used to exhibit this anger. We know Swami used to feel anger. That is corrective. That is meant to be corrective. It is not something the person. So when you say lack of kshama, it stays with you. When you hurt someone, you feel the hurt, they feel the hurt, and it stays with you. Then that is lack of kshama. But when you show anger, when you glare, that is when you glare your eyes, that's just to be it's a corrective measure, and there is love behind that. So that's a very subtle difference between lack of kshama and showing anger, so that it can be corrective.
In one of the previous sessions, please go ahead.
Go on.
No,
there's a
just
beautiful
one
description. Beautiful description that beautiful description that Swami gives. In one of the discourse, he says, when a massive elephant, is tamed, it is controlled by that mahout, by that small mahout sitting on top. But when that massive elephant is uncontrolled, when it is behaving uncontrolled manner, it can wreak havoc. And he says, your anger is that krodha is that massive elephant. And this kshama, once you have kshama, you become a mahout, controlling that. It becomes a tool in your hand. But the minute you lose that kshama, you become its victim. You are nobody in its rage.
Wow,
beautiful.
So,
lovely,
Swami,
beautiful analogy.
This is Swami's analogy. Swami says, when he gets angry, it's a tool in his hand. But when we get angry, we are a tool in anger's hand. So there's a sea of difference.
Exactly. What I wanted to add was exactly that effect, brother. Abhi brother, in one of our previous sessions, we had the discussion on Krodha and Raudra. Swami gave a very beautiful definition. When you are governed by the feeling of Dehabhimana, that is Krodha. But when it's because of righteousness, that righteousness is not being adhered to, and with that feeling, when that feeling comes, that is Raudra. What Swami shows is a righteous corrective action. It is not Krodha. It's basically for our benefit.
Beautiful. Brothers, I think this discussion needs to continue, and time is up, so I would like to respect the time. But this is a very beautiful point we have started, that Shama is a very beautiful tool to remove Dehabhimana or body consciousness, which is the biggest hindrance in our journey spiritually. And for that Shama, the deleting process, is the first attack on memory. So let us, we'll contemplate next week again, as Bhagavan would inspire us, to see how this deleting process works and how awareness plays a role, and what does it mean for a person to delete the memory. So let us look at this, and how does it reflect even on the way we conduct. The next point coming is nyaya, the justice part of in life, how we give justice to ourselves and to others by deleting this memory and leading towards lack of deyabhimana. So thank you, brothers, and thank you all the viewers for joining us tonight. I think there is so much we are learning in this discussion, and I am really grateful to all the viewers for their valuable inputs. And please continue, and we'll join this session again next week. So any final words, brother, or we shall say Sairam?
You can say silent.
Okay.
Sairam.
Thank you very much, and Sairam to everybody. May Swami bless all of us. And this video will be available on the channel, and we'll continue our journey next.